What will happen if we don't establish God's civil law? Hello, everybody. I'm Jim McCotter. Welcome. In the 1960s, for the first time in American history, Democrat leftists, along with leftist judges that they appointed, began to openly defy God and the Bible. They started making laws dramatically opposed to God and the Bible, not least of which laws to kick God out of all public schools, outlawing all Bibles, praying, Bible reading, and the Ten Commandments. As might be expected, not long after that, an avalanche of demonic law changes started to take place and have never stopped. Here are just a few examples. Legalizing the murder of babies, abortion. Legalizing sexual perversion, sodomy. Legalizing marriage perversion, the marriage of sodomites. Legalizing human perversion to perform transsexual mutilations. Legalizing societal perversion, making a host of unbiblical socialistic laws. Now hear what God declares at the conclusion of his national law in Deuteronomy 30, 15 through 20. Quote, "Now listen. Today I'm giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disorder, and disaster. For I command you this day to love the Lord your God and to keep his commands, decrees, regulations by walking in his ways. If you do this, you will live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you. But if your heart turns away and you refuse to listen, then I warn you now that you will certainly be destroyed. You will not live a long, good life. Today I have given you the choice between life and death, between blessings and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice that you make. Oh, that you would choose life so that you and your descendants might live. You can make this choice by loving the Lord your God, obeying him, and committing yourself firmly to him. This is the key to your life." End quote. This is God's law that Jesus commanded us to do and to teach in Matthew 5, 18 and 19. Jesus fulfilled all the law, including the ceremonial and sacrificial part of the law. But God's moral law, the Ten Commandments, the statutes, and the judgments, are forever and ever. Psalms 119:44 says, quote, "I will always obey your law forever and ever." End quote. God's law and justice that he gave to Israel was not just for Israel, but rather to be proclaimed and a light for all nations. Isaiah 51, verse 4. Quote, "Listen to me, my people. Hear me, Israel. For my law will be proclaimed, and my justice will become a light to the nations." End quote. The prophet Micah said all the world is to listen to the sovereign Lord, not just Israel. Micah 1:2, quote, "Attention! Let all the people of the world listen. Let the earth and everything in it hear. The sovereign Lord is making accusations against you." End quote. Even when Jesus comes back again, as prophesied by Micah, nations are going to come to Jerusalem, and Jesus himself is going to teach all nations God's law. Micah 4, verse 2, quote, "Many nations will come and say, 'Come, and let's go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of the God of Jacob, so that he may teach us about his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For from Zion will go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." End quote. So here's the question. Should we do everything we can to demand God's moral civil law for our nation today? Or another way to ask it, if God is not a liar, do you want you and your descendants to have a future? Quote, "to live or be destroyed?" End quote. If, as a nation, we don't openly start honoring God and his moral law and replacing the ungodly laws with God's law, you, I, and all our descendants surely will lose our nation and future blessings. Galatians 6:7 says, "Don't be deceived. God will not be mocked. Whatever we sow, we shall reap." One and only way. One and only way for salvation. True Christians who know the Bible declare one and only way of salvation. Ephesians 2:8-9. Quote, "For by grace you're saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast." End quote. True Christians will never back down promoting God's one and only way of salvation. Now, one and only way for marriage. True Christians who know the Bible declares one and only way for marriage. One man with one woman. Matthew 19:4-6. True Christians will never back down declaring God's one and only way for marriage. Now, one and only way for law. All this is to say, why do most true Christians not proclaim God's one and only civil law? This is God's one and only civil law in the Bible. How relevant is the issue of law and order today? And the Bible has the only answer. Maybe that should be, quote, "shouted from abroad and shouted from the housetops for all to hear," as Jesus said in Matthew 10:27-28, quote, "What I tell you now in the darkness, shout abroad when daybreak comes. What I whisper in your ear, shout it from the housetops for all to hear. Don't be afraid of those who want to kill your body. They cannot touch your soul. Fear only God, who can destroy both soul and body in hell." Do we fear too much what others think of us? Should we be afraid even if they, quote, "want to kill your body?" End quote. Why should we fear to proclaim the only perfect moral civil law in the world today? Do we let pagans tell Christians what to do, what to say, or what to participate in? Or do we tell pagans what God says? Most don't know that God's mandate is to rule in all three of His institutions today: family, state, and church. Christians are usually on defense. That's a sure way to never win any war. We must fear no one and start shouting everywhere to reinstate or instate all God's civil law today. Jesus said, quote, "Fear not, only believe. Go and disciple the nations. I am with you always." Have you told anyone that we must follow God's law in our government today, and that God promises to then protect and bless our nation? What a promise. Have you passed along any of my writings to anyone on this subject? Do Christians really not believe what God said? Quote, "Now listen, today I'm giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disaster." End quote. Those who don't think this applies for them today should read the very next sentence. Quote, "For I command you this day to love the Lord your God." End quote. If the first sentence is not for today, to choose with life and between life and death for prosperity or disaster, if that's not for us today, what about the second sentence? I command that this day we to love the Lord our God. So if that is for us today, then how can we not also believe the very next words that say, and I quote, "and keep his commands, decrees, and regulations"? Proverbs 6:23 says, "The law is the light." And Jesus said in Matthew 5:19, "Do and teach God's law."